Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast Iditarod coverage. We are now 24 hours into the race, and well, still kind of early to start really getting into things, but we figure we can at least give you a little review of what we're seeing after 24 hours. So, Sean, man, what are you seeing on your end over here?
Yeah, I think that's a good take. Everything that I'm seeing at this point, you got to take with a grain of salt, right? We're 24 hours in. You see Nick Petit's in the lead. He's blasted off 3 runs into Roan with short rests. There's advantages to being out front. You don't have to deal with, uh, you know, other dogs, right? There's no dogs around you, and the trails sometimes that sets up nicely being out in front, depending on the conditions. But he did just run through a pretty warm day, and then of course we're seeing just kind of the who's who the mushers entering into that front half of the positions of the race. So everyone I see in the top 15 is you know probably 10 of those people in the top 15 right now are going to end up in that top 10, and there might be a couple people at the back of the pack that are, Ramey Smith is back there. Maybe he'll get his dog team going. He was saying he had a low mileage training year, so he has to kind of start things easy, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, just starting to see maybe a little bit of what are the plans going into the 24-hour rest, and uh, but yeah, all fairly speculative.
Sure, and one thing that you mentioned is like you kind of brought up the back of the pack, and so one thing that really stood out to me, there was a period a few hours ago where Peter Kaiser was like neck and neck for first place. He's at this at point of recording, he's down to ninth place, but with the bib number 33 to be all the way up there in the top 10 already, I personally am pretty impressed. I mean, on the back end of whenever he does his 24 hour, he clearly, in my opinion, has, I don't know, maybe not the lead, but I think that's going to really help him. I mean, he's at mile 168. He's 20 miles off of Nick Petit, who's currently the only person in Rhone right now. So, I don't know. Just any thoughts on that? I think that's pretty impressive, honestly.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Firstly, is yeah, Nick is 33. Pete Kaiser is bib 33, and Petit is bib 9. So 33 minus 9 is 24 times 2 is 48 minutes. So, uh, you know, whatever time Pete Kaiser is 48 minutes farther along the trail than it says right now, right? So we haven't had that 24-hour differential even out yet. Also, I wanted to mention this. This is something that's been kind of frustrating following the race. Is that the mileages you see at these checkpoints are a little off. Like, of course, Willow is starting at mile 11 because they're counting for the ceremonial start, which really technically doesn't count. And then you go to Yentna Station, and that says that that's a 42-mile run, and I think that's a little bit shorter of a run. And then you get to Squentna, and it says, uh, you know, it's just I guess maybe their mileages aren't totally off, but you got to remember that there's minus 11, right? So that's 11 miles that started at the ceremonial. So it says we're 170 miles into the race, but it's more like 160. Um, and there's not all the run distances are perfectly dialed in because the trail changes. There's minor changes. Rivers freeze differently. Sometimes you have to go up onto a riverbank instead of right through the middle of the frozen river. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's a yeah. I think that's something to consider. Ryan Reddington and Nick Petit are out in front, but they are bibs number 9 and 5, so they are gonna the massive lead that it looks like they have isn't so big.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that in a year where Pete was a late entrant, right? And maybe some might look at that as maybe he hasn't trained as much as he has in years past. Maybe the team's depth or their, because they haven't trained as much, they might not be in as good of a situation. And, I definitely think you talk about Brent laying down the gauntlet, like, hey, I'm back. I'm running the same race that I ran last year. Catch me if you can. I do feel that Pete, isn't he more so known to be a little bit more, like, he doesn't usually press as hard this early?
Yeah, I think he's experimented with pressing hard early in the past, and it didn't go too well for him. But when the year that he won, there was a bunch of snow, and the people that were out in front were slowed down by the storm, and then he got better conditions, and plus he had a team that had just deeper reserves of energy, and kind of made his move on the coast. And we'll see. Speaking of the coast, Nick Petit's had his problems there in the past, and he's out again for the fourth time maybe in all of his Iditarods. He's in the first place, less than 200 miles into the race, and every single time it hasn't worked out for him. But he's got a new generation of dogs. Um, we'll see how it works out, but it's a kind of a bold play, and look at all these teams that I see in the front, 12, 15 teams. They're all kind of expected to be there. Kelly Maxner's got Dallas Seavey's dogs, and not just his dogs, but his prime, like, Iditarod winning team, the second place team from last year.
It's the A
He's
squad.
got veterans, dude, and I thought that may be the case with what Christian Turner has, but I talked to him at the race, and he has a younger team, but it doesn't mean that sometimes, like Brent Sasson said in an interview that I heard on the radio this morning, it's pretty funny. He was like, I got this one 3 year old on my team, and he has no idea what he's getting into, but he's stoked about it. And sometimes having that youthful bliss is more valuable than having. It's nice to have a balance of that youthful bliss with that veteran experience, right? The veterans are like, "Oh, coach, we got ourselves a big task at hand," and the youthful dog is kind of like, "Dude, I don't care. I'm just stoked to be here." So yeah, a lot of teams that we expect to see up front, but I just want to shout out to, I'm interested to see kind of a developing story. I think was Hunter Keefe being out here in the top 10. He's already established himself as like a good mid distance musher with a badass group of dogs from the Reddingtons, and you know everybody in this almost everyone in this race has a Reddington line of Alaskan Husky. Like they have a certain kind of style of long distance dogs. This Reddington family, because you got Joe Reddington, who started the Iditarod, and his Ramey Reddington, Ryan Reddington, Ray Reddington, Robert Reddington. All these guys all run the Iditarod. They all breed their own Alaskan Huskies. And you see Hunter Keefe running these dogs, and he's got talk about some youthful bliss. The guy's 23, 24 years old. Excited. He's been trying to do this his whole life. He's already finished top five in a couple of mid-distance races, and now he's out here, hanging in. But he's doing something he's never done before. So I think it'd be really, really impressive for him to keep this up. But I hope they also want to proceed with caution because like we're 10% away into this thing, 15. Long, long way to go.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think you were telling me how you were talking to one of your friends, and you were like, "Hey, have you checked in on the tracker yet?" And he was like, "Man, I don't usually take things too seriously, at least until day two or three." So, right now it's still super early on, but at least it's exciting. But like all the different name changes at the top. It's like I log in and I'm looking at the GPS tracker and I see one name. I think I saw Milla earlier. I was telling my wife, I'm like, oh, Milla's doing awesome right now. She's in first. And then like not 10 minutes later, I think Ryan Reddington was in first. And then so there's a lot of changing, which I think early on makes it exciting. And I think one thing that I do want to bring up is the fact that Brent laid the gauntlet down early, and people have stepped up to the plate. And the squad of people that is at the front, I'm I'm impressed with that. Nick Petit all the way down to let's go to Rainy Pat. So like 14th place, Matt Failer. He's 162 miles in, right? That's only 26 miles behind Nick Petit. That's literally how close first place to 14th place is. You know, um, One thing that stood out to me about the Yukon Quest is like Brent Brent was, to me, he was a full rest and run ahead of everyone. So at least early on, I like to see that there is some folks that are applying some pressure to him. I think that having pressure on Brent is what will make this Iditarod exciting because if he gets that big breakaway, that big lead, I think that it'll be hard to hold on. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you'll hear a debate about among mushers. That's it's disputable. But people say that the winner of the Yukon Quest is like a top 20, will get you top 20 in the Iditarod, alluding to how much more competitive the Iditarod is really than any other race. That's what is so attractive about this race to these guys that come and compete in it every year is that it's really, really, really competitive. I mean, to be in it and do something like for me having been in it and running what I think is my most like competitive race, especially in the first couple days, I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna set myself up to like for a chance at the top 20. In 2 days' time, I'm like, shit, I'm not even close. Like, there's no way. It's already over. Right? These guys are. This is like a next level of competitiveness. And look, I know that Brent Sass has got some competition around him, but we'll see what's up after the 24-hour rest. When teams come out of the 24-hour rest, you really have a good idea. But going all the way from Nick Petit back to Matt Failer, that seems like that's kind of the front of the pack. 12 or so mushers in there, and maybe a couple of those guys in the back of the pack might creep in towards the end. But I'm sure some of these guys in the front might, you know, dial it back, just depending on how their dogs are doing. Because you make these bold, confident moves with a fresh team, but then you got other factors like weather and sometimes they can get like a cold or something or some kind of minor sickness that the dogs kind of have to get more rest and not run as far and dial it back. So some of these that's probably going to happen to a couple of these teams where they're like, all right, I started with an Iditarod winning schedule, but this is just not the year. They're not. I'm gonna dial it back, and I'll be happy to finish in 10th. Right. So we're not gonna see those things happen here for another couple days, but it will. And someone like Petit who's busted out in front, right? He has a highest risk of having something like that happen where he has to dial it in, reel it in, slow things down a little bit, right? Because the faster your schedule is, the higher the risk is that your dogs aren't going to be up for it, right? And if they're not up for it, you see these things coming 2 days before it's a problem. So the mushers, a good musher makes those adjustments. Oh, looks like the dogs don't have that pep in their step that I was thinking they might have at this point. I'm gonna give them an extra hour of rest. I'm gonna make this 50-mile run a 40-mile run. I'm gonna run through the coolness of the night and rest during the heat of the day. And that's something that you were telling me there was like 45 degrees, right?
Yeah, so that was one thing I've been playing with the map behind you. So right now, most of the field is at Rainy Pass or about 20 miles shy of Rainy Pass, and so a good amount of people are at well, one person's at Rome, but a lot of people are heading into Rome. So the next phase of the race kind of heads a little bit north up to Nikolai. And yesterday we talked about weather being a factor. Um, I thought I had saw something that was going to be close to 40s, and then I read something today from Mark Nordman that maybe it wasn't Nordman, but I think it was from the Iditarod Twitter, and said that at some point along the route today, temperatures were as hot as 45 degrees, and I just thought that that was absolutely crazy. And then I know that earlier you mentioned now Nick Petit, he ran his dogs hard through the hottest time of the day. So these decisions that they're making, it'll be interesting to see how they catch up to them 2 and 3 days later. But yeah, 45 degrees is what I saw.
That's really, really warm, and that really does affect the way that you're gonna attack this thing. If you can find a way to just have a little bit of your run not be at the heat of the day, or the dogs rest really well when it's that warm. I don't, Nick Petit. I know that he busted out in front. I think he didn't have like super long runs to get there, but he did have kind of shorter rests. Right now, I wanted to point out that uh, Jesse Holmes and Brent Sass are right near each other, right going through Dalzell Creek, the Dalzell Gorge, and probably pretty sporty down there right now. They're probably having a blast. But
So
you know, this one.
as
Go
you're
ahead.
talking about the Dalzell Gorge, that is what between Rainy Pass and Roan.
Correct. It's just the stretch, the last uh, you go a mountain pass. This is something being from Atlanta that I didn't understand. A mountain pass is basically like the valley that gets you through the mountains, right? But the valley is usually pretty tall, right? And so you're starting in Rainy Pass, right? And you go up to the top of this pass that's above, like it's called Rainy Pass, right? But that Rainy Pass is a lake, right? But you can actually go up to the legit pass, and that's the top of this run, and that's where Richie Deal is, or so. And then once you get to the top, you drop down into the gorge, right? And so you're going downhill, crossing creeks and sharp turns and hollow creek beds. And some years it can be really gnarly and can break sleds and end races, and other years it's pretty sporty and fun, and it's like going and feeling like, oh, I'm an athlete right now. This is like exciting. So it can either be fun or it can be not fun at all.
Yeah. So do you have any stories of your experience in the gorge?
Yeah, I made it through fairly unscathed. I was just impressed. I think I made it through the gorge and I sighed a breath of relief, and then I got into the Rhone River, which was just glare ice, and I just ate it right under the ice. And that was like the same spot. Alley Circle had that same thing happen because the ice was sloped down and you can't really steer it back up, so you kind of it can happen. But yeah,
Yeah. There was one thing
I've
else.
heard of years where it's really like they've been like, why did we not reroute the race? Like this is ridiculous, right? But in years past, it's been sporty, but and maybe a couple of sketchy spots, but for the most part, good.
So there was another thing that I saw on Twitter that was talking about this section. Liz Failer also reports that Katie Jo Dieter is in Rainy Pass repairing her sled after a quote unquote mishap on the Happy River steps. Insider has an interview and they're uploading with Dieter on the mishap, so look out for that. So I'll be interested to watch that video, but
Mhm.
um, and that's where we've talked about Allie having her fall, or that was deeper in the
No, that
race.
was right before Roan. The Happy River steps are like really easy for the front runners, I think, and then for people like Katie Joe that are towards the back of the pack, they're actually really pretty difficult. I was towards the back of the pack as well. So you're going down these deep drops. They're not super long, but they're like sharp turn and then straight down. And there's three or four of them. And the first mushers go through and they just slam on the brakes, dig up all the snow. So it might have been nice and hard packed for those first few guys, so they can slam on the brakes and it resists and you go slow and it's not bad. Well, then once you slam on the brakes and you dig up that hard pack, it's just like this sugar. Imagine just a trail full of sugar and you stick a brake into sugar, you're not going to really go any slower, right? So, and then there's no really base and your sled's kind of bopping around, and then you see there's the hole in the snow where the person in front of me fell an hour ago, and now I'm falling into that same hole, and then it wraps around a tree and snaps a runner in half. It's like it's not it doesn't take much for it to go badly, and it but it also doesn't take much for it to go smoothly, and it's just that it's a pretty fine line between the two. So it's like it goes smoothly and you're like, that wasn't that bad, but then like it could not go smoothly and you're like, god damn it, it's like, oh.
So it just kind of depends on where you are and different kind of factors like that. But yeah, no, I just thought I'd ask about that, and I just wanted to circle back around. So we talked about the weather. So I'm actually looking back at some of these posts, and so it says just outside of Rainy Pass, Greg Heiser reported via Insider they imagine temps on that part of the trail are close to 45 degrees, bit warm after the last 2 days of cold. So that was one thing I wanted to follow up on. And then we also talk about how they're doing Nikolai's coming up and Roan and all of that. And Nordman reporting that the moguls on the trail from Roan to Nikolai are the worst he's ever seen. Compares it to
Oh,
mushing on a washboard with ridges 4 feet high.
Oh
So I was
yeah,
like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I got to bring
dude.
that up and see, just get your opinion on that.
That's really great. Wow, where'd you get this from?
This is on Twitter.
Dude, this is all shout out to Jess, friend's wife, for the
Yeah,
Twitter.
yeah,
We're unfamiliar with the Twitter. We don't know what's up with the
we're
tweeter or whatever they call it.
we're learning
So
we're learning so much on the fly. We were like, okay, we don't even have Twitter. I'm like, Jess, can you help me out? And so she's just been sending me what she finds, and so shout out to wifey.
so here's the thing about moguls, so you can have a nice firm hard trail that's set up nicely, but it only works if the trail is nice and flat. When you have moguls, it would be it's almost yeah. He described it as a washboard, and the peaks and valleys are 4 feet, from the peak of the wash. I don't know. You could say maybe like a if you saw a ripple in the water, and you like drop something in the water and you just see like the ripples, right? That's what they are, but they're like you go to the top of one ripple and drop down to the bottom of the next, and it's like a 2 3 foot drop. And so what happens is like the dogs have to pull your sled up over each mogul, and then your mogul goes sliding down, right? And then you have like that slack that is created when you slide down the mogul. So the rope is a little bit looser where the dogs are attached, but then it tightens back up, and then you go up the next mogul, right? So the dogs kind of feel that motion. You're doing your best as a dog driver to keep it as smoothly as possible with braking and letting go of the brake, and the dogs, but you only can do so much, and so the dogs can kind of feel that tug a little bit on their harness. So it's just a little bit more taxing the miles, and it's also hard on the sled because the sled just kind of it like imagine a roller coaster top, and you go up like this, and then the sled just kind of goes boom right back on the down part, and so it's just this constant slap of your sled onto the trail for literally like hours and hours and hours straight. Right, that's just it's a physical for the dogs. It's hard on your equipment, and mentally, it's like frustrating. It's just like not a fun time. And this is gonna not all miles are created equally. So, you could go and run a 60 mile, 70 mile run, and it might be just as physically taxing on a good day, right, as it would be going 40 miles through these moguls, because it's physical on the dogs, hard on your equipment. And so this is going to be something that maybe the mushers will make an adjustment. Maybe they believe in, hey, my dogs are hardy. We've been training on moguls all damn year. They know what's up. They know how to. So it just depends on your training. It depends on the conditions. Depends on your dog driving skills. But it's not. I tell you what. One thing we can guarantee, that section of trail is not going to be fun. And it's long. 70 plus miles run. So most of these people are going to break it up in some way. Uh, if you
So
rested Roan like Nick, he's probably going 50 miles just short of, right. It's a couple 20 miles short of Nikolai, and then pushing to McGrath. Is what I would guess for him. So we'll see.
so I've got the Google Earth up here, and I'm just kind of zooming in to highlight Roan to Nikolai. And um, the moguls that we're talking about, it looks like it's just that like first part of leaving Rome. Is that correct? Is it also leading into
N-
Rome?
No, it's so the Rhone is surrounded by the Rhone River that you see right there next to Rhone, right? That river is usually glaciated and exposed ice, so it's pretty tricky, flat, slick trail. And then you start to ascend up into the Farewell Burn, where a fire happened, I don't know, maybe like 6 years ago, 3 years. I don't know. There's a few different fires because once a fire happens, then sometimes it happens again in the same spot. And so the Farewell Burn has been a notorious section of trail in the past. If there's not a lot of snow because of the wind, it's exposed. All the trees burn. So when the trees block the wind, well, when they're burned down, they don't block the wind, right? So you get a lot of exposed dirt, hard on the sled. You run into tree stumps. can't really slow down. And then you finally get through that part and you've exited. It's called the farewell burn, right? Because you farewell to the Alaska range, bye bye. And then you drop down into these rolling hills. And that's where those moguls are once you kind of leave the mountains.
Okay.
And yeah, they're seemingly eternal.
Seemingly eternal. Sounds like it's rough, not just on the dogs, obviously. It's probably actually easier than it is on the dogs than it might be on the human because it's just like you said, there's so much up and down. And it sounds technical, it sounds tiring, it sounds like you can't really just like there. I'm sure there's some sections of the race where the trail where you're able to just kind of like let the dogs do what
Chill.
they do. Not in this section though, is that right?
Absolutely. That's a good point, man, because like this is that section where you're like concentrating. You can't just like sometimes when you're on a river and it's like flat and straight, you can just like, you know, sit back, eat some goldfish, like take a you could probably even squeeze in like a 5 minute nap. Like it's very easy. And then when you go on a section like this, you're just like have to concentrate and it's like you're already running on like pretty much these guys in the front of the pack have slept like an hour or two. And they're like you see the interview of Ryan Reddington getting into, I think it was when Rainy Pass. I don't know. He looked like he just his answer. They're like, "Hey, are you staying or sleeping?" He's like, "Stay." You know, are you, uh, you know, you're the first musher here, and he's like, "Yeah." You know, these guys. It's not. There's some times in this race that are obviously not that fun. Right. So when you have to spend all that energy, the little bit that you have, driving the sled, feeling each of those bumps on the sled, and then that's when you start to factor in the positioning of your dogs on a team. The dogs in the back of the team have a higher physical toll when they feel all those bumps right behind them, right? Because the sled's right behind them. So you want to make sure you're switching out those back dogs so that they can all be equally uh, physically and mentally ready for their rest and their food. Right, you try to even the load between your team as best you can.
Nice. Nice. Okay. Cool. Well, while I've got the map kind of pulled up, let's talk about 24 hours. So we're starting to get into some of the checkpoints. You said there's like three typical checkpoints for where you do your 24 hours. I believe you said Nikolai, McGrath, and Ophir.
No, it's typically gonna Nikolai would be like very early and probably not what a competitive team. And sometimes Nikolai's like the oh crap, my team's kind of got a little bug. I think we just need to reel it in and get to the finish line. Let's stop in Nikolai and we'll just take it slow and build this team back up, right? And then but really, the main three 24-hour rests are going to be McGrath, Takatna, and Ophir. And then Iditarod's also probably going to see a few. I remember one year Jeff like pushed all the way to Iditarod. Looked like he was like in a huge lead, but it was really he was actually pretty far behind because everybody was just coming out of their 24s and Ophir, Takatna, and McGrath. Right, so if you see a slow trail to Iditarod, they'll probably most of the teams will stop in one of those three checkpoints, and you want to, excuse me, you want to have your team ready for a 24-hour rest. So you're going to see these front runners. You know, typically you want to run about 50-ish miles and stop your team for about 3 or 4 hours. It's like a 60-40 run to rest ratio. And when you are getting into your 24-hour rest, instead of running 50 miles and resting 4 hours, you can run 50 miles and rest 2 hours or 1.5 hours, and then run 50 miles again because you know you got 24 hours of rest coming up, right? So you want to make a little bit of a push going into the 24 so that your team's ready for can benefit from 24 hours, but you want to find that perfect range and not be doing too much of a push to where they might need 48 hours to recover. So um, you want to
So
get them ready for a rest, but
l-
not push it too much.
let me ask this, and obviously what you're trying to accomplish when you have run the Iditarod might be different than what the front runners are, but where did you stop for your two Iditarods and what went into those decisions?
I stopped in Takatna and in McGrath, and I kind of like I knew I wasn't going to be competitive, so I was just like I'm going to stop there no matter what, you know. A lot of these front runner teams send out 24 hours worth of stuff to each of those three checkpoints, and also to Iditarod maybe. I mean, they're not McGrath and Takata aren't that far away. You might see someone go, you know, and make a like a maybe once you kind of pass over that 65-mile distance per run, you might see people go run 80 miles into their 24, but that's kind of pushing it. You don't want that. You still got 700 miles left, right, of this race. You want to save those long runs typically towards the coast. But what went into my decision, honestly, is not going to be the coolest thing that you've heard. It was McGrath had like indoor heating, and I wanted to sleep inside, and Ophir was like a tent with like a little shitty propane heater, and I was like, I don't want to sleep in a tent. I want to sleep on a freaking mat inside. Charge up my headlamps, charge up my like satellite phone. Like there's amenities at McGrath and in Takatna, and Ophir is just this like old mining camp with an airstrip. So, you know, if you're a front runner in the Iditarod, that is 0% what you're thinking about. You're thinking what is best for my dog team, not what's best for your own care and your, you know, what's going to make you more comfortable out there. It's what's going to make your dogs have a better rest and a better schedule.
Now, isn't it, if I recall, isn't it McGrath that I've seen where it looks like, I mean, there are planes, there's like a good majority of teams that are in McGrath. Is that where you see the most people take a 24-hour?
I would, it's definitely most, I don't know, I wouldn't say like it's a huge margin because Tecotnus also got a really nice village and they have like a sweet little area to sit inside and they make you a bunch of food and it's pretty sick in Tecotna as well. So I don't know. I think it's kind of
It's
pretty
all
even between
relative.
McGrath and Tecotna, and then I don't know. Ophir, I've never 24 there. I'm not sure, but I think that there's going to be some competitive mushers 24 and Ophir. I'm willing to bet. You might see a dark horse, push to Iditarod or uh, push to Nickel or do it early in Nikolai. I doubt they would do it in Nikolai, but maybe you go to the halfway point of Iditarod, right? That's the halfway mark. But that's kind of a bold play. But good, the right conditions, the right dog team, could be it.
Nice. I love it. Okay. And so just a few more things before we wrap up. I started noticing that some of the mushers are starting to drop dogs already. And, I guess I'm a little bit surprised by that. You know, barely over a, we're barely over a full day into the race and some are dropping. Now, there was one story that I saw. So if any of you guys are in the Iditarod Insider, you probably saw this, but pretty cool story where Ryan Reddington, his dog got hit by a snow machine, and obviously the mushing career of that dog was looking bleak. The dog lived, and Ryan was able to get the dog in shape enough to start the race. And I thought that was kind of like a testament to probably, he said the dog was a special dog. Um, so I thought that was kind of a feel good story, but that's not usually going to be the case, you know? So I thought I would ask you to kind of shed some light on why it is that we're this early in the race and we're seeing that dogs are being dropped.
All right, first things first. When it comes to dropping a dog, it's I dropping a dog means you get to a checkpoint, you can pick any dog at any checkpoint for any reason. Literally, you can be like, I'm tired of taking care of 14, I'm going down to 12. Take Flu, take Bobby. I don't want these dogs. And they're like, all right, cool, we'll take care of them. We got veterinarians here, there's volunteers, they'll get the love and attention and food and great physical care, and then they'll get flown to Anchorage on the first available plane, and then their handlers will pick them up in Anchorage. So that is you can drop all the way down to I think as little as 5 dogs. They have to be in your harness. That's something that you might see at the very last run, but you're not going to see anyone with 5 dogs at this early, of course. But what happens is you have some kennels have 100 dogs, some kennels have like 20 dogs, right? And you have 14 dogs you want to fill out, and there's usually about 10 of them are easy. Yeah, duh, they're going to be on my team. But then the last four spots, you might have nine dogs to pick from. You don't know. You got three dogs that have never run the Iditarod. You've got three dogs that their shoulders kind of been bothering them a little bit. It seems like they're running fine, but you don't want to push it too hard in training and maybe have some kind of reflare of the issue. So you just kind of take it easy with them. But when you get to the start line, you're not super confident that they're gonna stay durable. So you're not sure. Do you take the inexperienced dogs? Do you take the dogs that have a slight tightness? Uh, and so what the dogs that are getting dropped now are probably they had some kind of minor issue that they were thinking that have you ever go into some kind of physical activity and you're like my knees kind of feeling a little off, and then you start running and you're like, actually it feels pretty good, and then you go and you play the game and you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, it feels fine. I actually think it was just good for me to get this thing moving a little bit, get some blood flow to it. So a lot of times you bring those dogs that have that slight soreness and you run them, and you might have a slightly less, more conservative schedule, or maybe not, and maybe they just kind of run and it starts to get better, and that happens a lot with these dogs. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's like, you can tell he's running a little off. If we're only 100 miles into this thing, I don't want to deal with this. Like you're sitting there for hours staring at this dog, thinking, should I drop the dog? Is that something going on with its front left foot? Should I do something? I'm not sure. And just that mental effect on the musher of thinking that there might be something wrong is enough of a reason to drop a dog. And you have 14. That's why you bring 14. How many dogs do you actually need to pull this load? Eight or nine. You have five extra dogs. You're bringing your entire bench that would be sitting on the sidelines. They're coming with you because you can't, the team you start with, you can't add any new dogs into this race ever, right? You start with a team and you can only send dogs home along the way and continue down the trail with one or two or three or four fewer dogs. So you bring those bench players. You plan on having some of these issues. Sometimes teams take all 14 dogs the whole way, and it's an incredible accomplishment, a testament to their dog care and their training. And but that's not never really the plan. You know, you are planning on sending dogs home, and part of the reason that the Iditarod lets you take so many is because they don't want you making like a poor decision. Because look, I only started with 10 dogs. I can't afford to drop two dogs. So then you might and push to the next checkpoint when you should have just dropped damn dogs and send them home, right? So they want to avoid having that dilemma, and so when you have the slightest little issue come up, you can be like, you know what? I got 14 dogs. I don't even want to think about maybe there's a problem, right? And then of course you get softer trails, 45 degrees. Maybe the dog just is fully, totally healthy, but they step in a soft spot in the trail. It's kind of like going down the stairs, but you think there's one more stair, but there isn't, and then you kind of, that
Hyperextend your
can
knee or
happen.
something.
These guys
Yeah.
are athletes, man. They're like athletes. Athletes get athletic issues and sorenesses, and so that's what you're seeing happen.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. And I remember like in our last podcast episode, actually not our last, but when we had Eddie Burke on a second time, he was kind of talking about he started the season with 16 or 17 total dogs. And so that was at the beginning of the season. He didn't have a lot of wiggle room. And naturally, as we're kind of at the end of the season, we have another race next month, but um, the dogs just kind of naturally there's going to be some wear and tear, and so I actually think Eddie ended up bringing 13 to the starting line, and he's just
Oh,
like, I'm
really?
just going to start with 13. It said 14 on there when I first checked, and I think it actually still says 14, but I had been talking to him directly, and he had said that he was just going to stick to 13. So, um,
That's like a testament to like how many of these guys are bringing 16 dogs, and literally it's 2 hours before the start line, and they're sitting there like, "Yeah, should I bring Fluffy or should I bring Buddy? I'm not sure." And literally they have no, like they're just like, flip a coin. Like sometimes it's just Sometimes dogs will get you pick the male over the female because there's a 0% chance the male's going into heat. So it could be that could be it. Because all other things are equal.
Nice. Yeah, great points, man. Great points. Before I bring up, I wanted to talk about mushrograms, and when we do that, I'm going to kind of switch out the map view of what we're looking at. So before I bring that up, I just wanted to ask Sean if you had anything else that you wanted to just kind of any other observations after 20, what is it, 28 hours into the race? Anything else that kind of stands out to you?
There's a lot. It's a lot to speculate on and guess this and predict that. And I might have already made some crazy predictions or something. Just take it with a grain of salt. I'm not like a total expert on this. I've only ran the Iditarod twice. There's people who've run it 39 times. So, um, but it's day one, day 1.5. Like we got a long way to go. You go to the map and you just zoom out, like you're like, oh god, these guys have gone like so little of the trail. So there's a long race.
Yeah, we'll put that in perspective there. So
They're like,
they're
so
literally
where they're
here. I gotta pull up my mouse real quick. Bam, bam. All right, so they're all like Rainy Pass, Roan, and then heading here to Nikolai, and you've got all of this more to traverse. Or I don't think that's the right word, but
that's fine. No, that's good.
um, so yeah, there's a ton of the race left, and I've heard it said many times before that the race doesn't truly start until we hit the coast, right? So the coast would be over here at Unalakleet, right? So that's where we
Yeah,
really start
I know
to.
that the race doesn't start till there, but like there is still a race happening right now, and it's building the foundation of your team and the transition from them fresh, totally rested at the start line to them getting into race mode, travel mode, getting in that run, rest, that rhythm, getting the appetites figured out. Don't feed them too much so that they skip the next meal, but don't feed them too little either, right? And having that balance, so you can set up these guys to just be chowing down, eating 10,000 calories a day, right? You want to get that. All these variables have to kind of come together before you can actually try to race, right?
Let's see. No, keep talking, man.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the end of my point, I guess. But
Oh,
let's get to the
okay.
mushergrams.
Yeah. So, bada bing, bada boom. Just move this Sean's head a little out of the way. So yeah, um, Mushrograms. I'll kind of set this up for you. So during Sean's first Iditarod, when back in 2020, he ran last second for Jeff King, and for me that was a big deal. I wanted to be out there. It was last minute, couldn't get out there, and I'm like, man, how am I going to get through to Sean? And I found out about this thing called a mushergram, which is essentially where you can call the number that we put up here and you can leave a message for your musher. And then at certain points throughout the race, if you stay at a checkpoint and the timing of the logistics and everything works out, they'll actually give you these messages. And so I was not me, so I'm not even going to take credit for it. But wifey was browsing Twitter and she saw this and she thought that that was an awesome thing that they're bringing back because of COVID. When you ran in 2021, I couldn't do a mushergram, so they haven't had it for the last 2 years, and I'm glad to see that it's back. And so I just thought I'd bring that up and get your opinion on it. Obviously, you got to experience those notes, and just if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, I don't know what other people's experiences with them are, but I just happened to be stopping at Galena, I think, and was super deep into this race, and you just something about that's unique about the Iditarod is the loneliness. You don't see that really in any other race because at the Yukon Quest, it's on the road system. You can drive along the race, and your handler's there, and you have like girlfriend there or whatever, and you go same with the Copper Basin, same with the Willow 300. Same with the Cusco's only like 2 days long, right? So you get in the day six of the Iditarod, and you're like, I haven't seen like someone I really know in 6 days, and you just kind of feel a little alone out there. So you get to a checkpoint, and I had no idea that mushergrams were a thing. I get handed like a stack of letters that are an inch thick, and I'm like, what the hell are these? And it was just like, of course, Brennan and then family and friends, and then like childhood friends, and like you know Aunt Sally's cousin Deborah or something that I never met, but just saying like nice things, and I was literally like bawling, crying of just like happy to think that there like you feel like there's no one out there supporting you because you're just so alone, and to feel that support was like for me really nice, and even just like having I even get a little teary eyed just thinking about it now. It was a really special moment, and I don't know. I don't think that the front runners probably have the time to stop and read these things. I did it for like 15, 20 minutes. But send something to dude. I got shout out my boy Gerhardt, dude. He'll probably be towards the back of the pack. I'm trying to get that belt buckle that he was so close to getting last year. Send Gerhardt a what's up, my man. Representing South Africa. Like this guy is the one of the kindest dudes I've ever met. I'm sure he'd be more than stoked to get a letter from anybody. Yeah, Bridget Watkins. Maybe send one out to Brent Sass. Maybe he will open up a card or two, but I'm sure he's getting more than a couple of cards from the fans. But yeah, if you, I'm sure they'll read them at the end of the race, if anything. And I don't know. I think it's a nice sentiment just to show your support, and even if it's just one sentence, I think they kind of want you to keep them short, and you call. I've never done it, but what you call and then you
Yeah.
say whatever you want them to write down. They write it down for you and they give it to the musher.
Yep. That was exactly my experience. I called the number. Um, and they're literally 24 hours a day. They are the nicest people because I called twice. I called one time just to like, so essentially, again, some more background on what I did was like, I really wanted to be there for Sean, but we couldn't get there. And this was like the closest thing I felt like I could do during the race to just like let him have my presence, right? It was really hard as his brother to not be there. It sucked. Um, so I called up and I was like, in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna make a post to all my friends and family on Facebook and whatever. And and that, like Sean said, he's like people from like kindergarten or whatever. Like literally, I just put, I'm like, Sean's out there. He's going through, what is nothing at that point you've ever done as hard as that. I don't know if you'll like. I don't know if you'll ever come close to outside of the Iditarod doing anything that difficult. And it just felt like the right thing to do. It felt like a nice thing to do. And hearing that story, it makes me happy hearing that, 2, 3 years later, and even you just telling it, you kind of get a little emotional. So that I think that it was just worth bringing that up. So if you're following someone or you know someone, just a
Or even
reminder.
if you don't, someone you just fond of and you're rooting for them, send them a message.
Exactly. So before we go to sign out, you got anything else you want to bring up?
No,
No?
man, we're gonna be right back out in the morning.
Yeah, we're trying to keep at this nice and consistent. We appreciate all the feedback you guys are providing. We're again working through all the kinks. We don't know a lot about YouTube, but we're still figuring it out and having a good time doing this. Please like and subscribe so that you can get our content as soon as it's available. Again, a reminder, we have a podcast, we have an Instagram where we mushing.alaska.podcast, where we kind of promote the podcast more specifically. We have a Facebook page, Mushing Alaska. So make sure you're kind of like following us there for all the different content. We use all those different social medias, and just want you guys to stay connected that way. And that's it. Bye for now.
Tell your friends.
Like and subscribe.